The cafe was glowing with warm golden lights, the kind that made everything feel softer than it really was. Outside, snow drifted down in slow, silent flakes, covering the streets in a quiet kind of magic. Inside, though, Emily sat alone at a small table near the window, staring at her untouched cup of coffee as it slowly grew cold. This wasn't how she imagined her Christmas Eve. The blind date had started with promise. He had seemed charming at first, well-dressed, confident, the kind of man who spoke like he always expected to be listened to. But within 20 minutes, the cracks began to show. His eyes wandered constantly, his tone turned dismissive, and his questions felt more like interviews than conversation. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair, scanning her from head to toe, "you're a teacher?" Emily nodded quietly. "Yes, I teach second grade." He smirked faintly. "That must be exhausting. And not very profitable." She forced a polite smile. "It's meaningful work." "Meaningful doesn't pay the bills," he replied, chuckling to himself. Something inside her sank. By the time he checked his watch for the third time and sighed loudly, Emily already knew what was coming. "Look," he said, standing up and grabbing his coat, "you seem nice, but I don't think this is going anywhere." And just like that, he was gone. No apology, no hesitation, just gone. Emily sat there for a moment, her chest tight, trying to hold herself together as the reality settled in. Around her, laughter filled the cafe, families celebrating, couples exchanging gifts, children giggling with excitement. And there she was, alone, again. She reached for her coat, ready to leave, ready to disappear into the cold night, when a small voice stopped her. "Excuse me, are you crying?" Emily blinked, startled. She turned her head and saw a little girl standing beside her table. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old, bundled in a red coat with tiny snowflakes stitched along the sleeves. Her big brown eyes were filled with concern. "Oh," Emily quickly wiped her eyes, forcing a soft laugh. "No, sweetheart, I'm okay." The girl tilted her head, clearly unconvinced. "You don't look okay." Emily hesitated, then smiled gently. "Sometimes people just have not so great days." The girl nodded as if she understood something far beyond her years. Then, without warning, she asked, "Can you be my new mom?" Emily froze. The words hit her like a sudden gust of wind, unexpected, confusing, almost unreal. What?" she stammered softly. Before the little girl could answer, a man's voice called out from across the cafe. "Sophie, there you are." A tall man approached quickly, his expression a mix of worry and relief. He knelt beside the girl, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I told you not to wander off." "I didn't wander," Sophie said innocently. "I was talking." The man sighed, then looked up at Emily. "I'm so sorry." She has a habit of talking to strangers. Emily shook her head quickly. "It's okay. She's very sweet." He gave a small, apologetic smile. "She gets that from her mother." There was a pause, something unspoken hanging in the air. Sophie tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, I asked her already." His expression shifted slightly. "Asked her what?" Sophie looked between them, completely serious. "If she can be my new mom." Emily felt her heart skip. The man closed his eyes briefly, clearly embarrassed. "Sophie, we've talked about this." "But she looks kind," Sophie insisted. "And she was sad." "Moms are supposed to help when people are sad." Emily didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The man stood up, running a hand through his hair. "I'm really sorry. It's been 2 years since her mother passed, and she." "It's okay," Emily said softly. Their eyes met for the first time properly. There was something different about him. He wasn't polished like her date had been. His coat was slightly worn, his hair a bit messy, but his eyes were kind. Tired, but kind. "I'm Daniel," he said. "Emily." For a moment, none of them spoke. The cafe noise seemed to fade into the background. Sophie looked up at Emily again. "You didn't say no." Emily knelt down slightly to meet her gaze. "That's a very big question, Sophie." "I know," she said seriously. "But you feel like someone who wouldn't leave." The words struck deeper than Emily expected. She glanced at Daniel, who looked just as caught off guard. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. She just misses having someone." Emily swallowed, her throat tightening. I understand. And she did. Because in a different way, she missed having someone too. Daniel hesitated, then gestured toward the empty chair. Would you like to sit with us for a bit? I mean, only if you want to. No pressure. Emily looked at the door, where the cold night waited. Then she looked back at Sophie, who was watching her with hopeful eyes. And something inside her shifted. I'd like that, she said. Sophie's face lit up instantly. The three of them sat together, and what started as an awkward moment slowly turned into something warm, something real. They talked about small things at first. Sophie's school, Emily's students, Daniel's work. There were pauses, a few shy smiles, but also laughter. Real laughter. The kind Emily hadn't felt in a long time. At one point, Sophie climbed onto her chair and whispered loudly, "See. I told you she's nice." Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. You did. Hours seemed to pass without them noticing. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside, something new was beginning to take shape. Not something perfect, not something planned, but something genuine. As the cafe began to empty and the night grew quieter, Emily realized she didn't feel alone anymore. And for the first time that evening, her heart felt full. When it was finally time to leave, Daniel walked her to the door. Thank you, he said, for staying. Emily smiled softly. Thank you for asking. Sophie hugged her tightly before she left. You can say yes later, she whispered. Emily laughed gently, her eyes shining. We'll see. As she stepped out into the snowy night, the cold air touched her face, but it didn't feel as harsh as before. Because something had changed. A night that began with rejection had turned into something unexpected. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something beautiful.